right, good morning. Should we get started even though we're still waiting for Pastor Peter? Thank you all for being here. This is Stump the Pastor. This is my second time ever doing this, but I had a great time last time, so I'm excited to hear your questions and thoughts this morning. So anyone have a question that they're ready to ask right away or wondering about? Or anything I can tell you about, inform you about? Yeah.
How does the modern ELCA view the Reformation today?
I have to sit down for this one. How does the modern ELCA view the Reformation? Well, it depends on what congregation and what member you talk to. I think that in the church-wide office, the leadership of the ELCA, pastors, all of us really like the Reformation and celebrate it. But I think there are some members of the ELCA that don't know much about the Reformation at all, or what it means, or the history behind it. So there's always a need for continual education about the Reformation. Do you all know what the Reformation is? It's the celebration of the founding of the Lutheran Church. Yes. That could be the other thing, is that there's an assumption that people know what it is. And so that continual education is really important. And the main idea around the Reformation is that we are a church that is always reforming. So we hold tight to our theological principles, but everything else we hold loosely. And we are continually looking and trying to be open to ways that we can change as a denomination and as individual congregations. So I think that's important, important value. Yeah.
So my question relates to that, to Reformation, and I'll start by making an observation before I get to my question. So I read in the newspaper not long ago that Luther is selling its building and rethinking its model, focusing on its mission, which is education of our leadership, and recognizing that we don't necessarily have to have the same infrastructure, which makes a ton of sense to me. So my question related to that is, are we doing the same thing as it relates to the organizational infrastructure of the ELCA? Notably, we have church offices that are, in many cases, empty, and that's a large cost. And we have an infrastructure of a whole bunch of synods. And again, I'm not suggesting that there's an answer. I'm just wondering, are we reflecting on that? Because we want to put our resources into mission, love of neighbor, et cetera. Our infrastructure should be only what we need to enable that. So what are your thoughts? What's going on?
Yes, so you're talking about Luther Seminary, which is in St. Paul. They have just announced recently, it's the seminary has been there for many years, that they are going to sell their campus and move. We don't know where they're moving to yet. That hasn't been announced. And it will be, I'm guessing, a smaller, less expensive, less overhead as far as old buildings. So it's a move for nimbleness, and then also thinking about that they always want to have, what they've been saying is to continue to educate leaders and to have those in-person opportunities available, but also to continue to build their online education. Yeah. We don't know exactly, because they haven't announced where they're going to go. I don't even know if they know yet, unless you know more than me.
Not site-wise. I know that they're doing listening sessions sort of about that right now.
Oh, good to know.
Was that the only question?
Was that's an example? That's an example, but what is the ELCA
Yep.
doing?
The
Thinking about its
last, you can probably speak to this too. The last churchwide, I think in 2022, created a learning task force to look at the larger organization of the church and whether it still makes sense. And they came up with some recommendations. And Pastor Peter was at the most recent churchwide where they reflected on that. So you have some firsthand experience.
Let me just comment on Luther Seminary a little bit first, as my alma mater as well. So one of the things that, and I actually, interestingly, one of the directors for admission at Luther was on my flight down to the ELCA Churchwide Assembly, and we talked kind of at length about the vision of having distributed leaders in their context being raised up for ministry roles. So you might have like a farmer's spouse in rural Kansas, let's just say, and they're really involved in the church. They're really getting. They start to sort of find their place in a variety of different capacities, and then they start to kind of wonder about what theological training might be helpful in that context. And the dream of that really is that you don't have to then take that person away from their place where they're being gifted and called and equipped and set up for God's purpose, and you can actually meet them where they're at. And the admissions counselor said that they have one of their largest programs right now is a graduate degree certificate, which basically kind of lets you get your foot in the door, take a couple classes, see what it's like, maybe come for an intensive. The other thing that she said was, and her name's Jessie LeClaire-Vlachta, she said that what they might be able to do too, similar to this sort of the story of Jesus on the level place, they can bring people to unusual locations to do intensives that are then might be closer to where they are. Then they could have easier kind of, it's all about access, I think, right now. And I think that is the infrastructure model that they're investing in trying to equip a new chapter of what that leadership in the church looks like. Still really, because I think when we were in seminary, it was amazing to me how many people had uprooted their lives, and so like, and probably how many had not, and chosen to stay and not entered ministry because of that. There might be a few of those in the room even who did not go down that path for a variety of different reasons, but who might have felt a call at different times in their lives, right? So I think I really see a lot of hope and potential in it at Luther right now. I never was really a residential student, kind of per se. I didn't live on campus. I didn't like eat in the cafeteria or anything. My dad did, but I didn't. So I kind of saw the benefits of the hybrid in that, but not quite the model that they're going towards now. Any other questions on that? Just as I'm sort of stream of consciousness. On the infrastructure thing for the ELCA, what struck me, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this on Wednesday at the Adult Faith Lab in the living room at 6:45 if anybody wants to come. But what I kind of experienced in the ELCA is this incredible compromise that was made the year I was born in 1987 to kind of keep the unity of the church together while also giving a ton of autonomy to local churches and power on the congregational level. And that compromise still is like the tension of conversation that I experienced at Churchwide Assembly. That you have sort of like churches in in West Virginia that are very, holding on to their autonomy as they are being pressured by other churches, like they're trying to kind of be poached by other churches to come to other denominations, and sort of holding the line of being a part of the wider ELCA, at the same time that they are kind of being encouraged that they're going to be better off in another denomination. Fascinating. I never heard of that before, that was happening kind of out in the real world. I think the other piece that Pastor Jen talked about was the Commission for a Renewed Lutheran Church, which sort of structurally is trying to make sure, similar to Luther, I think, that anybody who wants to be in ministry, if they feel called, if they feel ready to go, if they feel God's Spirit inviting them into service, that they would not run into any unnecessary roadblocks, that they would not have to, and particularly marginalized communities, particular people of color, and the lesbian, gay, trans, two-spirit community would not be able to be a part of that kind of call and witness, and to try to make sure that there is nothing in sort of the fabric of who we are that would prevent folks from being a part of that. Does that make sense? The other kind of two infrastructure things that were really fascinating to me were the budget for ELCA World Hunger, which is substantial, like $100 million, and the ELCA Foundation, which is like billions of dollars. That we have a very generous church, and I think what the conversation right now, and I think that we're having sort of both locally and more countrywide, I think more micro and macro, is how do we steward those resources well together? How do we deploy resources to where they are needed and make sure that people are being fed, that people are being taken care of, that our neighbors are being served? I think that's a really big question kind of at the ELCA forefront too.
I think there's definitely a tension, that there is concern about stewarding those resources the best way we can. And I think there was tension at the churchwide assembly about people thought that commission didn't go far enough to really name the things that we have to do to streamline the budget. So I think that's going to continue. Those conversations are going to be important.
Yeah, I mean, there's question about sort of whether we need a large central church office space in Chicago as well, or whether folks are sort of distributed and deployed more nationally, and sort of the Caribbean, and being able to better serve because we are more nimble and not tied to like an office building on what is the street? Higgins Road. Yeah, Higgins Road. Yep. There's definitely, I mean, I experienced this. I don't know if you did at ELC, at the assembly. There's like people who talk about, like the Higgins Road is going to come after us, or Higgins Road is going to try to, and I think about that too with like Trinity and the Synod. Like so much of it is guidelines. There's very little that sort of forces us to do a particular thing because of that autonomy piece, which is both really freeing and requires a lot of dialogue and conversation, and us really being relationally on the same page to kind of have conversations that are necessary. Is that, yeah.
Thank you. Nobody can hear me anyway. It does? You can hear me? Okay. Okay. I was going to bring up something that I heard as a young child, and maybe some of the rest of you did too. And it was always in connection with Martin Luther and the Reformation. and that was allusions to the priesthood of all believers. Is that a familiar memory
Yes.
to many of you? So maybe that is still in play.
Yeah, it's a very important principle and belief value of the ELCA still today, and we try to live that out in congregations and in the larger church.
And then I was going to make one more allusion to my own experience, and that is I feel that as it was presented to me, that the Reformation was one area where church and not laity came together in education. Because in school we learned about the Reformation because it was a very important happening. That's not quite the right word, but event or thought process, whatever you will have, in the history of the evolution of
Western
government or
civilization,
Western
yeah,
civilization,
as we know it.
or whatever you'll have. So there was that connection as well.
Luther was really kind of the first in the church to advocate that girls would receive the same education that boys would, because he had
Very far-sighted gentleman.
right. I mean, I think that there are a lot of those sort of educational and sort of social service community support systems that I think he saw as an outgrowth of the ways that the priesthood of all believers serves vocationally. I did hear that too at Churchwide, this sort of big push that we do not, and we work really hard not to differentiate those who are sort of quote unquote called into formal ministry and those who are called to the variety of vocations in the ways that we serve the church together. That sort of push for uplifting the laity was a really big piece in that, and I think that priest of all believers language is still really a part of it. I see that like amazingly at Trinity. I think so many people really feel liberated to use their gifts here. So that I felt really affirmed in that principle or that sort of philosophy, that theological foundation is really rich to folks on this side of the metro. Yeah. You have not been long from the front.
Getting back to the importance of the Reformation historically that you were mentioning, that it was also the advent of the printing press, which was a major jump technologically in communications. And you know what we're going through now, we're seeing major jumps in technological developments. And do you see further ways that now the church can take advantage of those, like Luther and others did in the printing material for everyone to read, like in the Reformation time?
Yeah, access for people to read and learn and be connected, and also his translation of the Bible into the people's language, really important too. So everyone had access. I have a story about what we were talking about a little while ago. My first call was in Boyd, Minnesota, which is right by Dawson, by north of Marshall. And it was a tiny town of 250 people. And I was the pastor of the church in town, and there was a woman there who was a member, and her kids were in high school. 2 of them were in college, 1 was in high school, but her husband was a farmer, is still a farmer, and they farmed his family's land. And she talked to me many, many times about how she felt so called to do ministry, to word and sacrament ministry, and how she just didn't know what to do because she could not leave her like she and her husband could not move. And she did not want to go to Luther and have to move away from home during the school year. So she was part of an early program at Wartburg Seminary in Iowa that was training people who wanted to stay in their home area and become pastors. And after I left, she became the pastor of the church. And she was there for over 10 years as their pastor. And like nobody knew them better than her. Nobody understood their concerns and their lifestyle and their values better than she did. And so that's just a little personal story about how I've seen the seminary's flexibility around people's lifestyles to really be a blessing. Like when I was there in the 2000 is when I was in seminary, and families moved their entire, the parents would move their entire families into the apartment buildings, and so they'd have 3 kids squashed into a little apartment for 2 years, and then they'd have to move for internship, and then they'd have to move back for senior year. It was such a hardship, so I'm glad that that's not a requirement anymore.
I learned this actually not too long ago, that my dad we did not have housing when we moved to when my dad and my parents made the decision to go to seminary. They didn't have a place for us to live. They didn't know, which is another the things you do for Jesus kind of thing too, a little bit. It's a big. I mean, obviously that's a huge risk, and I think that's maybe some of the both and of our theology too, our Lutheran roots, is being able to say there are going to be significant risks anyway. How about we provide access to make sure that you're going to be invited and there isn't anything getting in your way to feel equipped for whatever ministry you're doing, no matter where you are. Do you want to talk about AI, Rich?
Well, yeah. Just think of how the church in general today is utilizing technology to get the word out. But now with AI, what does that look like? And all the not so helpful paths that AI can take us down.
Right. I mean, that's going to be kind of also the both and of the printing press too. I mean, there's both at the same time that the Reformation utilizes this. There's going to be a lot of pushback, a lot of spilled ink that's going to challenge Luther's proclamation of the gospel too, right? And I think we live in that same time now, that kind of how do we cut through the noise of that? How do we really get to the core of what we believe God is calling us to, what we believe sort of the needs of our neighbors are, how that compels us to do something in the world. I mean, I think that's sort of the natural progression of our theology as well, is out of God's love for us, how do we find ways to love others in the world? I think there's amazing gifts that this technology will give for the sake of that. I think being able to have access to information, which I was just talking to a buddy of mine who does direct assistance, mostly with housing, but with cuts to SNAP benefits, the things that they're sort of like really concerned about. Number one is like connectivity, not having their phone cut off, which then you are like cut off to so many things that are interconnected to how modern life is right now. So being able to like get assistance for that is such, like, you it kind of changes like some of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like how much that's really shifted in our culture. And that's true not just in the United States, like that's true globally now, how people gain access to a variety of different things that they need. So, I mean, I think there's great benefit to it. I think we continue to have to be on the front lines of it and make sure that we're sort of, wise as serpents and innocent as doves as we discern sort of what the path for our churches and the church as a whole.
Yeah. I don't want to say too much more, but in the church, I think one of the big challenges for the church today with all these technological improvements is to be a voice that can be trusted. It's so hard to know what's right, what's wrong. Does this voice have my best interests in mind? Is it coming from a place of love? And that the church really needs to make sure that we continue to be a trusted voice.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments about being called the professions other than the ministry. I definitely felt called to work with children. But I was thinking of the faithful people across Minnesota have named their towns after many saints. St. Peter, St. Paul. You know, who was St. Cloud?
We live out the unique priesthood of believers in my house because my husband Tim was a pastor for I think 10 years, and then he felt called to work with kids, and now is an elementary teacher. So your life changes, and he has wonderful stories. Well, he always has wonderful stories, but he has great stories about how he uses his pastoral skills in the school setting. Whenever teachers are struggling, they often come to him for a listening ear or advice. And they'll say things like, I know you used to do this church thing, so can you help me out with X, Y, and Z? There is a St. Cloud. Oh, interesting. A French monk. It's technology.
I think Randy knew right away.
Where's the microphone?
This will be my last question, I promise. So to the point about communications, and I could be wrong, but it feels like with Marilee's leaving, we're not investing as much in our communications staff. And that troubles me for the exact reasons that we're talking about. That's where we should be putting more investment. And I know we have budget issues, but I know we have a budget, honey. And I know we have to worry about that. I'm just saying, am I wrong? It feels like we are investing less in that when, in fact, we really need to be savvy about that. I know we have a budget.
I don't know the exact numbers, but I do know that the position, the communications position that Marilee held, the hours have been reduced. She was full time, so it's pretty substantially reduced. But there's plans in place to add more hours. So it's like trying to be nimble as we anticipate retirements, and so it's thinking through all of that. But there is, I think, among the staff too, we're all very mindful that the communications position is different, and Peter knows more of the history than I do. But we're all working to think through a strategy around that, make sure that the communications are still important and still happening, and to pay attention to what are the I don't want to say consequences, but what's the information from the congregation about how the communications are happening for all of you. So that's something I'll be paying close attention to while I'm here is, are you feeling that the communications aren't as helpful, aren't as frequent? However you notice that, that'll be helpful to know as we continue with staffing plans.
I think Marilee, it's just so hard to replace somebody who knew Trinity so very well, and to make that transition really quickly. I think, and I think because of some of the reason that we are in a rapid state of change, communicationally together, technologically together, I do think we're making some really good steps internally to sort of develop and utilize systems that we have in place better or more, kind of similar again to the Luther conversation, trying to be a little bit more distributed in how that gets delivered, both how we talk to each other, how we keep information, how we share information, all of that kind of internally and externally, I think, reflects some of that concern. I do think you're 100% right. Like it, and we've been trying to take steps to sort of put that higher on our agendas each week. I really credit Pastor Jen for championing that too, and being able to sort of like make sure we are always hitting the same communication lines together. Some of the sort of delivery mechanisms of that, though, remain really cumbersome to me. I would just say that's and sort of like whose job is this, and how do we have a clearinghouse that can capture that and then be able to share it. It's big job, super big job. I'm very thankful for the Mary Lees in the world like that, and who was really invested in that. And I do think Sammy is really good, and we'll learn really quickly kind of who we are and be able to help in that.
Yeah, I have a totally I have a totally different issue, and the question I have is, how does the Reformation continue to inform us as to our relationship with the Catholic Church?
He hands it to me. I know that there is not too long ago. I can't. Bishop Lowell would know more than me. She's invested in. Well, that's beyond Catholic though. That's Eastern Orthodox. But I think there recently was like a connection with the ELCA and the Catholic Church. I'd have to look it up. But I know that there is, like, at the higher levels of the church, there are discussions about connecting and being supportive of one another. And so, yeah, I think that, and also even throughout my own years of preaching as a very young preacher back in 2004 on Reformation Sunday, I would often say, well, look what the Catholic Church did wrong 500 years ago, and look what we got right. And this was a large mistake for a young preacher. So over the years, I learned that, no, that's not helpful at all, and that it's much better to frame the Reformation as something that, and Luther didn't even want the Reformation. He wasn't seeking that. So it was just to reform what he saw were his major concerns with the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church at the time. So I think as I've gotten older and learned more, I've also learned about the connection between the Catholic and the ELCA Church. And a lot of it depends on the local ministeriums. The Stillwater has a very strong ministerium, which I've been delighted to see, where the local pastors of all denominations get together every month. And sometimes, I don't know how active the priests have been, and it often depends on the priest, too, whether they have time or the inclination to really connect. But in White Bear Lake, there's the St. Mary's, which is a large Catholic congregation, and I don't know how many years ago, we always did an ecumenical Thanksgiving service together, which we no longer do, sadly, but the priest at St. Mary's invited me to preach in the pulpit for that Thanksgiving service at the St. Mary's. So to me, that was just so lovely and generous, and really showed me that we can connect on so many levels.
Yeah, I mean, I would say too, just sort of in my time in ministry, that it's likely that Lutherans and Catholics probably are more aligned than they've ever been. That there's just a lot that it kind of mainline Protestants and Catholics are pretty unified on a lot of things. So there is, at least in my experience, a lot of common ground and a lot of work. I think even kind of the following the Annunciation tragedy too, that a lot of the local churches, a lot of the Lutheran communities, other denominations were all really supportive, being able to work together in that too, and to see ways that God is working through all of us. So thankfully, that's a good, I think that's good news for us.
Thank you. I just wanted to add another pat on the back for Marilee because Marilee was very good at English grammar. And I happen to be the self-appointed chief of the grammar police. And there are a whole lot of people that are not really very good at the basics. So when you're looking to replace anyone in communications, I would hope to see that as a priority on what you're looking for.
Everybody needs an editor. I do think that's sort of some of the challenge right now too, is like it's such a big job to be able to do sort of all the ways that we communicate right now in print and online and social media and all of it. You do have to, of course. Yeah. No, I agree. Amen. Self-appointed.
With regard to AI, we have to be very careful. I spent the last 2 weeks doing a legal brief using AI. When I checked the authorities that AI gave me, they did not stand up. They were very creative in their use of authorities. And had I gone into court with that, it would have been trouble. So when we consider the use of AI in the church, we have to be very careful.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the questions about bias too are really troubling to me. That the models themselves, sort of like the nuts and bolts behind it, are often really skewed. So having to kind of, again, that the idea of trust and who can be trusted, like what there was a fascinating podcast that I listened to on the way down to Tennessee this last like a week and a half ago. That basically one of the writers for This American Life was able to find an AI model that mirrored his voice, was able to have conversations with family members and friends that could not tell the difference. Live conversation, live reporting, was able to interview people while, and had a very convincing mimic of that. So, I mean, I think the kinds of potential scenarios where that somebody could, abuse that or could potentially fake somebody, I think is really, really, really troubling. Ron. No, yeah, just yeah. We can repeat that.
I'll stop yelling now. When we were talking about things to believe and not believe in AI, AI is all based on databases. And anybody who's done databases or have written databases or have used databases, you have this problem called crap in, crap out. And as soon as you have an issue with the internet is full of crap. And as soon as you have databases that are based on what they can find on the internet, you are going to have crap. And so maybe I should change that word to lies because the internet is full of lies. And so whenever you see anything on the internet nowadays, since everything is integrated into the internet, you have to be aware and afraid that everything that you hear has potential lies in it. When you watch TV, every 15 minutes, there's lies. And it's not just the programming, it's the commercials. The commercials kind of by definition are lies. So as soon as you see a commercial, remember, most of it is a lie. And you can't believe anything that's there.
To be very critical, I think, very critical of the information that we would choose to share.
And you have to do it all the
And
time.
cautious,
Therein
incredibly
lies the issue or
cautious.
the challenge.
Yep. Yep. The algorithms also, are designed to amplify the stuff that is most obscene or most extreme. Those are the things that get the most bites. And so it just sort of feeds that impulse reaction or that sort of anxiety in us, and to be able to really kind of take a breath through that, to be able to not respond right away to those lies or those things, or even to assume that any of it is true. I think it's hard, but I think that's very much the reality that we are in right now.
And maybe that's something that we as a church might try to promote or whatever the right word is that we should be a source of truth.
Amen.
And then we need to have the data.
And there's skill
to-
sets
to-
around
to
that,
back our
right?
truth.
There's training around that. There's communication and relationality around that, to be able to really, hopefully, work towards that truth and trust together. That in this place we really value it. Yeah.
Last time I asked for this, I promise. One question that I would hope we would all ask more often is, who programs Google?
We all do, I think, is part of it.
Google is taken as the word. Where does it get its information?
Other things. Thanks, y'all. It's good. Rich. Really appreciate it.
Burning questions?
We probably should. We do have a few more young people who will be affirming their baptism to this next service. But that was really special for Alexandria. That was really nice. Yeah.
Well,
Go in
thank you.
peace to love and serve the Lord.
That's right.
Thanks be to God.